Super Talk Mississippi.
Good morning again, Super Talk Mississippi, the JT Show. How you doing, everybody? Glad you're here. We got so much to talk about. Hey, I want to remind you tomorrow, don't miss us. That'd be the JT Show. Don't miss us. We're going to be on the coast, Mississippi's Gulf Coast. We'll be right there in the Coast Coliseum and Convention Center along with Families First. And of course, for you, the Healthy Teens Initiative and the Healthy Teens Rally that's going on tomorrow. Healthy Teens for a Better Mississippi Rally. It's a free event. Marcus Dupree, Ted DiBiase Jr. are going to be some of the speakers. Liz Ketchum is who we'll be talking to. You can talk to her, 266-284-0013, as we'll be on the Mississippi Coast Coliseum Beach Boulevard tomorrow for a great thing, Healthy Teens for a Better Mississippi Rally. And Auditor Pickering, I did that one in Jackson, and just to see the young people that have come out that are doing everything that they can to be leaders for the next generation. There is hope. There is hope when I saw that. So, and there's some good kids out there that are really working hard. And listen, if you want to be a part of this tomorrow, if you want your kid a part of this tomorrow, please get in touch with her. But yeah, it's a great site. How are you today?
Man, I am doing great. Absolutely.
So how many monster deer have you killed yet? Or have you been too busy chasing down cosmetologists and auctioneers?
You know what? We've been busy. I squeezed a few extra days and afternoons in the wood right there at the snow and the ice. And of course, I picked the day the deer were all bedded down, hunkered down for the cold front coming in. And my brother goes out the next day and they're moving everywhere. So yeah, it was fun. We had a good deer season this year down at the farm. And it was fun. Freezers are full.
That's a good deal, man. That's a good deal. So
no trophies.
I got a lot to talk to you about today. I want to start off with this whole debacle. This, how terrible and awful and mean and nasty the Republicans are in the legislature and the governor and the speaker for wanting to blow up MAEP and start over. There's a good reason for that, isn't it?
There's a very good reason. We've been talking about this for years from the audit department. First of all, the previous formula really was unauditable. And we've been saying that law requires that I audit that every year in August, every year for the legislature, and the numbers aren't valid. They go into the formula. We've been telling them that year after year after year, and our current leadership and Governor Bryant are saying we need to fix this, and it needs to be simple. Right now, you've got in your hand, and we have on our website, or will this afternoon at osa.ms.gov, the actual flow chart that makes up the MAEP funding formula. Now, what's up and what you've got in your hand is only one page of 7 pages worth of flow chart. It is very complex, it's very convoluted, a lot of if-then statements, but the public needs to know what we're dealing with. I mean, it literally goes from the average daily attendance to the base student cost multiplied plus the free lunch participants, and then you get into the whole, that equals the MAE cost reduction to local contributions minus the required local contribution, which equals the MAE costless. You get the idea. It just goes from one box to the next box, adding, subtracting, and Joe Q public and superintendents, teachers, and the legislature can't understand what the actual formula is. So they're redrafting the formula this year, saying it should be a base cost, and then you know what the weighted issues are, and every superintendent, every local school board can add those up and say, this is what our budget should be for next year. It's very simple.
Yeah, I just took a picture of it. You said this is one of 7 pages of this flow chart?
Absolutely.
And you wonder why MAP doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely, and that's the problem with it. And we've pointed this out, we've shown it to the legislature 2 or 3 years ago. We're emailing it out to them again today. It'll be available on our website this afternoon. Like you said, take a picture of it, pop it out on Twitter. We'll have it on social media by this afternoon for the public to see. Should not be secret. It should be very available. When I served in the state senate, I asked one of the Department of Education finance personnel, what is the formula? He said, Senator, it's really too complicated. You just need to trust us. This is what the number should be. And at that point, I knew we had a problem. When we're telling decision makers, trust us, it's too complicated for you to understand, it's bad policy. And so now we're telling the public, this is what the formula looks like. This is how complicated it is. And the new formula should be very simple, very straightforward, so that everyone from the local to the state, the legislature, Department of Education, the local boards, everyone should be able to understand how we get to that final number and where we started.
Yeah, and well, as the state auditor, I know you got to love that. You got to trust us. I know you gotta love it when you hear that.
You know, that's what leads to every problem we find with boards and commissions across Mississippi, is when you start having the bureaucrats say, trust me, you know, it's too complicated for you to understand. Government should never be that complicated. It should be straightforward, transparent, so that every taxpayer, every voter can look at it and go, I understand how 1 + 1 = 2, and this is where we get to, or this is how we get in trouble. And it never should be a trust. You know, President Reagan always said, trust, but verify.
Exactly. So, you know, it's funny to me that all of a sudden, now that this is happening, we're starting to see people, let's just face it, our newspapers, which, you know, you can take it for whatever it's worth. Our newspapers now all of a sudden have decided that we got to slow down now. We've got to slow walk this thing. This is going too fast. These are the things that I'm hearing now. They have made no bones about this, auditor. They have said from the beginning, they being the Republicans who are in charge right now, who have been duly elected to be in charge, that they weren't surprised. They weren't going to slow walk this. They said MAP first, and then get ready because Medicaid's going to get worked over too. These are two huge goals that are out by this legislature to try to do something this year, and so far so good. They're standing by it.
You know, the legislature, you've had a Republican majority in the Senate and the House now. We're in our second term, so we're at year, 6, 7 of a Republican majority. You talking about slow walking? I think we've been deliberate. Our leadership have gotten their heads, their hearts around what the issues are. They've worked up real solutions. So wanting to slow walk this thing, I think we're looking at a glacier movement, what the press is wanting. You know, you take a look at the MAP funding formula that was passed in 1994. I've got an entire spreadsheet. Again, it's going to be on our website. We're sending it to the legislators that give you every amendment. This thing has been amended over a dozen times since 1994, changing the rules, pulling out accountability. Used to, if you didn't turn in your transportation plan to the Department of Education, your funding was withheld at the local district. Guess what? They amended and removed those teeth out of it. There was no longer any way the money could be withheld if you didn't do your job at the local level. And so this formula has been amended, it has been changed over a dozen times since 1994. The fact that we're talking about changing it, simplifying it, making it clear and understanding, as well as putting good accountability into it, I don't know what's wrong with that. I think that's something the public ought to be cheering, the teachers ought to be happy for, and this is where we ought to be pushing this argument and this agenda.
Well, it's obviously, it's something that needs to be fixed. It's something that needs to be done. I know people are wanting to put more, they're wanting more money into the classrooms. And you want something that you can verify,
Yeah.
that you can hold accountable, something that you can audit, that you can go in and see. You brought up another good point to me. You talking about the grades and the scoring of the schools, how that's constantly changing. So we never really know if we're doing any better or any worse.
In the last 12 years, the state has had a grading scale. We started off with these 5 numeric categories with descriptive name changes and categories. You know, you're a level 1, level 2, level 5 school district.
Right.
Then in 2008, they changed that to do descriptive. If you remember the old STAR school, the superior, excellent, succeeding. And then in 2011-12, they changed it to an A through F. Well, they've tried to change it again this year. This time, the U.S. Department of Education said, no, we're not going to accept what you're changing. And every time it wasn't just the names, but they changed what went into that grading scale. And the problem is, here in 2018, I can't look back at 2009 and compare how we are today with how we were in 2008, 2009, because they've changed the rules, the definitions, the grading scale. And when you change that, you can make it say whatever you want to, and you can't compare, are we any better today than we were then? According to this information, there's no way of telling that. And that's a problem our legislature ought to address as well, is say, we need to drive this stake in the ground and be able to tell 10 years from now, have we made education in Mississippi better?
And let's face it, that's the only way we can do this. Until we can hold it accountable, I don't see how we make it better.
Exactly. And the U.S. Department of Education, I mean, they saw that, and they have, as of right now, said they're not going to accept the current grading changes.
Stacey Pickering, State Auditor, here with us, hanging out here for a couple of segments here today. And we always appreciate him coming in here. I want to talk about the Board of Cosmetology, the Board of Auctioneering, and also a couple of metropolitan areas, a couple of cities under the gun, as you were there to make sure that everything is done right. This unbelievable at the Board of Cosmetology. We'll talk about that when we return, hanging out with you. Super Talk Mississippi, State Auditor Stacey Pickering, and more coming up next here on Super Talk Mississippi. With our good friend Auditor Stacey Pickering here with the state of Mississippi. Well, you've been busy, hadn't you?
Yeah, we have been busy.
First of all, why do we have an auctioneer board? I can understand the cosmetology. I can understand that because you're dealing with health and hygiene and things like that. But obviously that wouldn't be run correctly either. Some of these pictures on your website are just absolutely amazing. First, let's start with the Board of Cosmetology. This place was in shambles.
Well, I don't know exactly their previous executive director, what his problems were. The day we showed up to do their compliance audit, he literally resigned, walked out of the office and quit it that day. We had over 9 months of applications for licensures just sitting around in boxes and file drawers with the checks attached to them. They had not deposited over $250,000.
So wait a minute. So you're telling me that there's kids out here, there's young people out here who maybe gone to school,
Trying to get a job.
to become a cosmetologist, and the cosmetology board, because of somebody's sheer laziness, hadn't even processed the applications or cashed the check.
Or cash the check. Not only trying
So
to
how
get a
did you
job,
find
how
out?
about
Was this-
those that are out there working?
Was this people complaining about this? How did you get wind of this? I mean, I know you can't tell me everything.
No, actually, this is one of those things where we literally, every year when we finish doing the state's comprehensive annual financial report, the single audit of all federal dollars, we've got a couple of months there in our schedule. We go out and do compliance audits. We're not looking at the finances. We just want to know, are you following all the state laws, the rules, the guidelines? Are you doing your job the way you're supposed to do financially? And we call it a compliance audit. And it just sort of happened to be that the cosmetology board was one of the places we went to this year. We weren't expecting anything bad, had no real complaints. And we walked in the door, and like I said, he quits. We show up, and there are bankers' boxes with check stapled to them. We even have some applications, there's nothing stapled to it. The staple's there. Was it cash? Was it a money order? Was it a check? It's gone. And we don't know who took it, what it was, and we're trying to dig through that. The good news is the board has hired a new executive director. She's come in, she's cracked the whip, they're cleaning their house, they're getting their house in order. I'm proud of the job Sharon's doing over there. And she's trying to clean up a mess she inherited, and they're trying to get their house in order and get licensings out, contact everybody if your license has expired or lapsed and it's not been renewed. They're trying to get it in order, but it was a train wreck. There's no other way to do it, and the board was not overseeing it, making sure it was done right. And at the end of the day, if you get appointed to a board in Mississippi, you have responsibility. You're not there just for policy and to, get your per diem and drink a cup of coffee. You're there to actually do the job.
Well, is any charges pending, or can you
well,
comment? I know you probably, there's some.
Well,
things
once
you
we
can-
finish the compliance audit, that's public, but where we are now, all that data, all the information, everything we did discover has been turned over to our investigative division, who are now working the investigation. And at the end of the day, our agents and the attorneys will decide if it's civil, if it's just misappropriations,
Okay.
negligence, or if something actually criminally took place, and at that point, we'll be before a grand jury.
What about the auctioneer board? I know you had to get in the middle of that as well.
Same exact kind of thing where you've got an employee who the board was not overseeing. The board would say, hey, we need to have a meeting. She'd say, well, there's not enough money in the budget. Sorry, it won't happen. And they didn't come. They never questioned it. They never demanded to see the finances. She did not take a day off for over 3 years. A single day. No sick day, no vacation. This was one of the hardest working folks until we looked at her social media. And guess what? She was doing horse shows all over the Southeast and all over Mississippi while she was getting paid by the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi through the auctioneer board, and she was off running her own private business, grooming horses or whatever it was that she did, and it was all over social media where she was. So either she was not working for the state, or she was double dipping and getting paid while she was also running her own private business. Then we get into all kind of purchases from iTunes.
Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. I have no, if I found an employee in my office that was spending taxpayer dollars on iTunes, not only would they be fired, but we would be looking to bring charges against them. There's no valid reason for us spending tax dollars with iTunes or buying fans multiple times and other issues. So there's a lot of purchases made, a lot of in-state and out-of-state travel that's being questioned. And again, once we finish the compliance audit and said, hey, this board was not doing what they were appointed to do, then we've turned it over to our investigative division. And at the end of the day, they and the prosecutors will decide if it's a civil or criminal case.
Pelahatchie, the city of Pelahatchie, you've had to go round and round with them as well.
We're in the middle of that one. We hope to have some news out this next month when it comes to Pelahatchie, how they were managing spending the money they were getting an asset forfeiture, which is a big problem. I hope our legislature is addressing this term, dealing with when a law enforcement agency seizes cars, monies, resources through drug interdiction programs, and they get some money back. The strings attached to that is that that money can only be spent on law enforcement. And what it appears to be is that Pelahatchie was spending that on recurring expenses, other staffing and personnel, which is way outside the bounds of law, and at the end of the day, that money's gonna have to be paid back to the taxpayers' coffers, and there may be some individuals that are gonna have to be held responsible, and that hopefully news will be coming out in the next 2 or 3 weeks out of our office as it deals with Pelahatchie. That case has been ongoing for several months now.
When people are, when people can see something, if something doesn't look right, doesn't smell right, it's probably rotten. It
Well-
usually turns out that way, about 9 times out of 10, doesn't
You know,
it?
the vast majority of the times, if you don't think it's right, it's probably not. But we do get calls where folks say, well, this doesn't look right, but then once we explain this is what the law allows, our hands are tied, or it's legal, it's not right, it's legal, we need to get the law fixed and changed. That's how we work those remedies in those situations. But when the public sees it and they go, what do I do? Who do I tell? Who do I call? That's real easy. You go to our website, osa.ms.gov, and there's a big red tab that says report fraud. All they have to do is click on it. The phone number's there on the website for them to call, 1-800-321-1275, 800-321-1275, and they can talk to one of our agents and file a complaint. It's all very easy, straightforward, and available for them there.
This deal in Pelahatchie, do you know how far this goes back yet?
You know, we're looking back as far as 10 years, and, you know, that, again, to remind the public and to remind those public servants out there, public employees, when it comes to taxpayer dollars, there is no statute of limitations. We can go back 5, 6, 7, even 10 years and look at how money was appropriated and spent.
Well, that's a good point. It's a good point you've got going on right there, and the state auditor is always, Stacey Pickering here is always protecting your tax dollars. That's what your job is.
That's what it
It's not
is.
personal, it's not political, it's your job, and it's the tax dollars that Mississippians pay in, and it's your job to make sure that it is spent where it needs to be. Stan at Ripley on the C Spire text line said, JT, my wife's a CPA here in Ripley. She has to contact Auditor Pickering's office a couple times during the year. She said they're always helpful, very helpful, great to work with. Tell him thanks.
Excellent,
It's-
very to hear.
He says it's tax season now and she's not always happy when she gets home, but tell him on behalf of her, thanks a lot.
Well, appreciate the work she does. Undoubtedly, if she contacts our office, she's working with the city or county. And we've got CPAs, local elected officials, they contact our technical assistance division. We do over 2,000 hours of training every year to keep people out of trouble. We don't want to play gotcha. We want to do all we can on the front end, working with the Supervisors Association, the Municipal League. And we've got that same 800 number. All they have to do is call and say, I want to talk to somebody that can help me in technical assistance, and we will research the applicable Attorney General's opinions, the state law, the GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board guidelines, and say, this is what you need to do to follow the law in Mississippi to be accountable. And we work with cities and counties across the state, so I'm glad she reaches out, and I'm glad our staff has been able to help her, and hopefully that's what they do across the board.
Well, and it's always there for you. Again, folks, you can go to osa.ms.gov. That's Office of State Auditor, osa.ms.gov. And as I said, if you smell something, it's usually rotten. If you see something that doesn't look good, it's probably not good.